Here we are. Another episode of Let There Be Talk. It is Monday, April 8th. And we have a legend. Another legend here. Holy smokes. You know how I love the drummers? I looked back over the 7 years of the podcast, and I would say it's almost a drum podcast. As I looked at it over the years, I have always said, great drummer makes a great band. And I've had some of my favorite drummers ever on this show. And just to give you a little list of it over the 7 years, I wanted to do this because that way the lazy people or the new listeners don't go, you should have such and such on the show. But look at this. Look at this list of drummers. I'm tooting my horn, motherfuckers. All booked by me, no agent, no publicist. Look who I've had on this. The Groove Kings, Brad Wilk, Kenny Aronoff, Josh Freese, Gene Hoglan, Slim Jim, Jorma Vick, Tim Alexander, Patrick Keeler, Jimmy DeAnda, Joey C., Franklin Vanderbilt, Dave Lombardo, John Theodore, Joe Travers, Jim Bogus, Bron Daler, Tony Hajar, and Steve Gorman. Come on. That is insane. That's an impressive list of incredible drummers out there in the world playing rock and roll. And the reason I read their names off is because I think everyone should know who these fucking people are. That's how I feel about drummers. Killer drummers, killer band. Bottom line, God, I would have loved to have Bonzo on. Can you imagine Bonzo at his age now? The life he would have lived? Like, yeah, all right, let's do it, you know? Today's guest, I've been watching this man play drums since 1981. I went to the Dan in the Green 4th of July weekend. Hart was the headliner. Ozzy Osbourne, special guest. Blizzard of Oz band. Tommy Aldridge on the kit. From that day on, he was a name in my head that I would always throw out in the studio. Like, you know, hit it more like Tommy Aldridge. Groove more like Tommy Aldridge. Come on. All that, you know, just being a whipping horse on drummers. I wasn't that bad, but in my mind, I was saying that. Tommy Aldridge is absolutely 100% a drum legend. Played in Black Oak, Arkansas. Then joined Pat Travers and absolutely destroyed it on the live record. Just unbelievable. If you don't know that live record, what are you doing? Go For What You Know is one of the greatest live records, and I haven't talked about it much because it's one of those out of sight, out of minds, but then I fired it up recently. It is the ultimate summer rock record. It opens up with Hooked on Music, and it just kicks you in the fucking face with groove. Boom, boom, out goes the lights. There was a time where that fucking song was played on the radio every couple hours. And then, of course, my favorite of all time, the Crash and Burn record with Snortin' Whiskey. I played that song at the gym a couple of days ago, and I was fist pumping. People are looking at me like, that guy's a freak. From Pat Travers, he goes into Ozzy, of course, after the two records are made, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. He doesn't record on those records, but he joins the band shortly after and is in what I would consider one of the most iconic bands of the 80s, the Blizzard of Oz band. I still have the jersey with the four guys sitting on the stairway, Randy, Rudy, Ozzy, Tommy Aldridge. And I saw the band a few times, and thank God I did. It was one of the greatest rock and roll assaults going around America. Tommy was, of course, sleeping in that bus that day of the fatal plane crash with Randy. And man, it still blows my mind that happened and Randy is gone. An incredible conversation with Tommy about his entire career, and especially right now playing with Whitesnake. I believe Coverdale told me 30 years playing with Whitesnake. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed talking to Tommy Aldridge. This guy's 68 years old and just on it. I don't know how these people have these great memories. They just must not have done a lot of drugs, because this guy has a perfect memory. His body is incredibly in shape. He doesn't mess around. He knows he's going to be out on tour all the time playing drums, so physical. Drums are brutal. There's no glory. There's no glory in drums. And it should be massive glory. We should celebrate these rock and roll drummers, soul drummers, funk drummers, R&B drummers, all the drummers, because they chose at a young age to play an instrument that is way too many pieces, and you need a fucking van, and you're the first one to load in and the last one out while everybody else is out partying. It's a brutal ride. You've got to love it. You've got to love it. And this man has definitely made a mark his entire life playing drums. All right, some upcoming gigs before I do get into the episode. Here we go. This week, I'm going to be in Detroit. Please come join me. Do not miss it. Comedy Castle, Thursday through Saturday. I want to see some Del Raisers out there. I don't want to come out and then hear, when you're coming to Detroit. I'm coming this week. Please come out. Let's hang out. Let's laugh together. Vegas, Comedy Cellar Rio, April 29th through May 5th. And La Jolla Comedy Store, heads up, got moved 2 weeks before. So I am there now, June 7th through the 9th. Do not miss any of those shows. Big love for some of the new Patreoners. If you do want bonus episodes, there's a new one up right now with King Buffalo. And that's a great band. So there's a bonus episode up on the Patreon right now. There's been 29 of them, I believe. Big shout out to Danny, Procup, Rhinito, Violet, and Mark DeWay. All brand new Patreoners. I love you guys. Thank you for joining. Patreon.com/Dean Del Rey. That's where you're going to get all the bonus episodes and a lot of other stuff coming up on that. This is episode number 470. Before we do get into the episode, I just want to mention that we lost an amazing singer over the weekend. One of the greats, one of my favorites, Mr. Sean Smith from Brad and Satchel and Pigeonhead, and also sang and played percussion and keys with the Afghan Wigs. The man was an absolute soldier of rock and roll and soul and funk, and one of my favorite humans ever. I played some gigs with him, and we had spoke recently hoping to get him on the podcast, and we lost him over the weekend, which is just fucking bummer. And from what I read, we lost him to complications of diabetes. And me being a diabetic, don't fuck around with that, people. You know, I know it's fucking hard not to have sugar or booze or whatever, but once you got diabetes, it's over. You had your run, tap out, and just carry on. I know it sounds crazy and hard. It is. No one likes candy more than me, and I'll tell you that right now, but you gotta choose one or the other. There's no tricks. You get diabetes, it's over. Your run of being sloppy is over. All right, I love you guys. Thank you so much, Michael Devin, for hooking this up, and thank you, Tommy Aldridge. I love all you guys. Subscribe, leave a review on the podcast, people. Keep the candles lit. Here he is, Tommy Aldridge. Hey, here we are. Wow, this is an amazing guest today. Actual legend on the show here, Mr. Tommy Aldridge. How are you, buddy?
I'm okay, Dean. Thank you so much. Legend, I don't know. I think that's just a kind word for old beat-up has-been, I think.
No way.
A lot.
You are a legend. Are you kidding me? In the drum world, you are an absolute legend, man.
Yeah, I've been managed to fool lots of people for quite some time now, I think. Yeah.
I think the first time I saw you was Ozzy, obviously, because I just missed you in the Pat Travers era because that ends about 79 or something.
Mm-hmm.
But
before you were born?
No, I'm 53. But I've always wanted to have you on. I've had some of the great drummers on this show. Blows my mind, actually, to think about everybody that you played with and everything that you have done.
Oh, well, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Have you done any podcasts?
I'm sorry?
Have you done a podcast?
Very few.
Yeah.
Very few.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do many interviews. Not that I'm averse to them. It's just I sometimes get myself in trouble because I say things, about the things that have happened that are actually true, and you have to be careful when you start speaking the truth, don't you?
Oh yeah, right. Like especially these days, people are like,
yeah.
And also if you're in the biz still,
Yeah.
And then people are like, hey, I can't believe you said that.
Yeah.
Now I never knew this that you were from Florida. I always thought that you were from London or something because.
No, actually, I was born in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh wow.
And when I was an infant, my father was in the Navy, and we moved to southern Florida. In my formative years, were in southern Florida, and I've lived in England for a while, and kind of all over. So I kind of have like a bastardized accent, I think.
Yeah, like southern combo British.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm coming or going, So it's it's a very strange accent, I'm told.
When you were a kid and you started playing drums, were you doing anything else besides that? Like, were you playing sports, anything like that, or was it just rock and roll hits you and boom, you're on your way?
Well, I was quite young when I first started, and actually the first instrument I played was sax. But seriously, when I was when I was an infant, my parents gave me one of those kind of silly made-up drum kits made out of cardboard with a palm tree on the front. And that was just kind of a toy, But later on, when I was about 10, I got a saxophone, and I tried that for a bit. But then I got a proper drum kit, snare drum, and sticks, a book of rudiments and stuff, and started working about 12 years old, then. But no, I was doing a lot of cycling then, and kids ride bikes and stuff like that, playing tennis and stuff. But no, drums became pretty primary early on, yeah.
Who was the guy that made you want to play drums? Was it Ringo? Was it the Beatles?
No, it was Brubeck. It was Dave Brubeck with the Brubeck Quartet, because I started playing actually before the Beatles became widespread. And so the first music that I listened to, my mom was the music person in the family. She listened to a lot of Elvis stuff and so forth. And the first music that I came in contact with was a Brubeck Quartet that really made an impression. That was the music that was played on the local TV station, like between station breaks and stuff, when you're watching the news, and they'd go to a station break and they'd play Take 5 and stuff. And so that was the first music that I really got into, was early on, yeah.
They actually had like a band would play the commercials?
No. The music would be on the TV.
Right.
It wouldn't be a band playing. It would just be
just the music.
Recorded,
Gotcha.
off the Brubeck Quartet Take 5 album. Yeah, Blue Rondo a la Turk and all those crazy. And it was Brubeck. Joe Morello was the drummer, and it was crazy. Odd time 13s and 5/4. All different odd time signatures. And I didn't realize at the time that was complex, It wasn't until the Beatles came out that I realized, I can learn this stuff a lot easier than I can, the other stuff. So
that 4 on the 4.
That was my first introduction to music early on, was jazz stuff, yeah.
Once you get the kit and you're learning to play, do you start diving into some rock and roll? Like, who are you listening to?
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, then of course it was the Beatles, the Stones, then Hendrix, Cream, all those guys, when I was coming up early on, and it morphed. I started with a snare drum and sticks, and then I got a hi-hat, and then months or a year or so later, I'd get a kick drum, then I'd get a tom-tom, because I was doing it myself, and I didn't have, my mom was somewhat supportive, but it was something, my dad was not into music. If you were a musician, you were either a drug addict or, sexually confused, or a combination of both, So I hid the fact that I was a drummer from my dad. I was a drummer for years and years and years before my dad ever knew about it.
Wow.
So my mom, thank God, she was supportive, and she would help me. She said, if you earn $5, I'll throw in another $5. So I'd go out and mow lawns and throw newspapers and things that kids do, to make money to buy the stuff. So it was a process of getting a kit together, and that was probably a good thing. As I was learning the rudiments, I wasn't old enough really to learn to apply them to a complete drum kit. So the kind of piecemeal approach to it kind of probably worked to my advantage,
Were you taking lessons at all?
No. The only thing available was school band, and that was all drum corps stuff. And in hindsight, if I have any regrets, that's one of the few regrets that I have, that I didn't do drum corps. I just wanted to go head on straight into the drum kit, and I wanted to play. I didn't want to play band music, high school band music. I wanted to play, the music that I was hearing, and there wasn't an alternative to that. And again, that's one of my few regrets. I wished I would have a much broader vocabulary musically. I really, really try to impress that on young drummers. Get a good foundation in the rudiments. Drum corps if you can. Spend a couple of years in drum corps. It's indispensable later on in your career. I have a lot of holes in my playing, and that's the reason why. I didn't have some of the foundational stuff in place. Before I jumped. I kind of put the cart before the horse.
Did you go back in any time of your career to relearn stuff or to learn stuff?
Yeah, I'm always backtracking and retrospecting. Trying to pull some of that stuff in. It's just a lot of times you get the style of music that I was playing. One of the things that I didn't want to do was play music. I had this thing where I wanted to play rock music, and anything else to me just wasn't applicable, and so consequently, I didn't develop the diversity that I think any musician or any drummer should really develop. I encourage young drummers, play stuff you don't particularly enjoy playing. If it didn't accommodate me emotionally, then I wasn't that interested in playing it. Consequently, my record collection, the things that I listened to, really wasn't music driven. It was drummer driven, and so the music that I listened to wasn't very good music, but it had some kick-ass drumming on it. I later on, as I grew older and I became more mature, and I started appreciating more that the drums are just a very small part of the music, and I started, developing a desire to be more of a musician than just a drummer, and so, and then my music taste really became a lot more diverse, and I started really appreciating, guys like that. Before I didn't think there was much going on. Ringo Starr, Charlie Watts, all the cats that I really didn't listen to early on, for that reason. It wasn't that dramistic, the music, but it was very musical drumming.
Charlie Watts and Phil Rudd are two drummers that I always think about, that people think like, they're not doing shit up there, and then they go and try to play, say, a Stones cover or an AC/DC cover, and it's just never, ever there. There's so many layers there that don't seem like there's anything there.
Yeah, it's not a technical endeavor what those guys are doing. It was never a technical endeavor, I don't think, for Phil Rudd or for Charlie Watts. Even Charlie Watts is more of a jazz swing drummer, and in the Stones, that's where he made his name, but his real love, I think, is in jazz and swing. Very light, very finesse guy, and he's playing with the Rolling Stones. And I think the combination of those contrasting styles made what he did really, really, really special. In case of Phil Rudd, it's like four on the floor. There's nothing more simplistic and basic than what Phil Rudd does it, but it's got such attitude. It's so musical what he does, and even though it's very simple and you can sit there and you think, oh well, that's easy to play, and in some regards it is in its simplicity. But you're right, there's so many layers there, and the way that the hookup between the rhythm section has and what he's doing against Angus and the vocal line and all the counterpoints that's going on, it's incredibly complex what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
The sum is so much greater than the whole is so much greater than the sum of the parts.
I mean, look at Chris Slade, who's a fantastic drummer, but when he gets an AC/DC, you're like, oh, this isn't even the same thing at all. Same with Simon Wright,
Yeah, and those guys are two, very accomplished, quite capable drummers. It was an attitude. It's something that really doesn't have anything whatsoever to do with drumming or technique or anything. It's about music. It's about personality, And everybody, we all learn the same rudiments and the same instrument of the language of our instrument, but the way it's approached and the way it's played. I mean, John Bonham, when he would play, that guy was so far on the backside of the time that what John Bonham played, you get someone else. That's why you hear people that are trying to cop the Bonham thing. There's so few people that the art form of playing that far on the backbeat, it's a true art form, and Bonham he personified that. And there's just so few people that have that kind of feel.
Yeah.
You can hear it the first time and play what he played. John Bonham was a really straight-ahead, simple drummer. But again, the counterpoint between Plant's phrasing, John Paul Jones, and Jimmy Page, wherever the hell that guy's from, it's not planet Earth, The culmination of those four elements, it made something so huge and massive that it sounds like it was recorded yesterday. It's still just as relevant today as it was 25, 30 years ago when it was recorded. Amazing.
In the 60s, when you're starting to play and you hear Bonzo or Keith Moon and these very, very signature sounding drummers, were you like, oh wow, man, I got to get my sound going and stuff, because everybody had their sound?
Mm-hmm. One of the first really cool guys that I heard play live was Keith Moon, and man, it was in New Orleans, and when I was young, and it was one of the first rock shows, and it was called the British Invasion Tour, and I think Herman's Hermits were on that bill. The Who closed. I think there were 4 or 5 other British bands on there, and it was not like today where they match. When you go and hear a show today, usually the 2 or 3 bands that are on the bill are it's the same genre of music.
Right.
Back then, Herman's Hermits play and the Who closed. It was like
like that Bill Graham shit. He would have like Cheech and Chong, and then he'd have a folk singer, and then Zeppelin.
It was so diverse, and then I remember hearing Corky Lang, the drummer with Mountain, and man, that guy blew my mind, and those kind of guys, and what those guys did, I couldn't play anything like Keith Moon. I don't think anybody can play like Keith Moon.
No,
I mean, Keith Moon was so off the wall. It was very. There was nothing in Keith Moon's style of drumming that is orthodox. It was totally unorthodox. That's what made it so amazing. And if you try to critique it from a technical point of view, you can't, because it's all over the shop. There's nothing. It's like a really schooled boxer trying to fight an unorthodox guy. In many cases, he's probably going to get knocked out, because you're expecting things to come from, typical left hook or a right uppercut or whatever. Well, you don't know where it's coming from. And Keith Moon's drumming, you didn't know what was going to happen next. I don't know that he knew what was going to happen next.
Yeah, He played like lead drums.
Exactly.
He was just kind of
and it's somehow again, it was that magic between what he was doing with Townsend and with Entwistle and it was just. It was magical, And when you come up listening to that kind of music, it really gives you. I'm thinking, well, there's no way that you can cop that guy. You can't copy it. You hear, and when first time I heard John Bonham, probably like many other drummers, not just drummers but musicians alike, when you heard Led Zeppelin. Because when I heard Led Zeppelin, it was not just the drums, it was just tearing me up. It was everything. It was like something that, and even though it was Southern Delta blues music, it was completely repackaged and morphed into something that was all brand new. And it was a music that I grew up listening to from the South, and it was all these black cats, I mean, the Lemon Song, it's all these old blues cats, and only now are people starting to realize that, these guys are going to court for plagiarism and all this, and, copyright, and, from, left,
Absolutely.
right, and center, because they copped that stuff note for note. They just repackaged it and did it in a way, and I think the most important element in what Zeppelin did, it happened to come from John Bonham, and I'm not saying that because I'm a drummer. He changed the complexion of contemporary rock music, that one guy, And even though Zeppelin was John Paul Jones, Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, and John Bonham, I think John Bonham was really the cat that really, the element in that band that made it something just supernatural almost, kind of like Stuart Copeland did with the Police. That whole ska kind of reggae thing was because of Stuart Copeland, and it was a culmination of that and the real pop sensitivity that Sting brought into it with his high tenor, that really high, cool voice, and those ska kind of leanings. It made it wild and crazy. It was something that was completely different and greater than the individuals that were involved. That's what a true band is. Another example of that is, I think, Hendrix with Mitch Mitchell. Mitch Mitchell was a swing big band jazz kind of drummer, and what Mitch Mitchell did, the combination of Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding and Hendrix and what those guys did together, there was a lot of contrasting elements in that music, but the combination of it all made it for one something that was really special, and in my mind supernatural, super musical, and Cream was the same way. And so those are the kind of bands that I grew up on. So when I started playing drums and I started really trying to find out, well, who is it that I am, and I'm taking the rudiments and trying to apply them to the instrument in a way, I never copied John Bonham. I was inspired by him. I could never copied Keith Moon, definitely inspired by him. Mitch Mitchell's the same. I don't think I play anything like any of those guys, but those three guys were probably the linchpins as far as inspiration for me when I was coming up,
What made you start with the double bass? A lot of people would say you're like one of the pioneers of the double bass. And what got you into that?
Well, Louis Bellson played double bass drum. He didn't play it very often, and usually had a towel sitting on it. He was one of the first cats that I saw with two bass drums, but I never really he didn't play a whole lot on it. Of course, Ginger Baker, he was the first rock guy, that had two bass drums, and Ginger Baker used two bass drums. He was one of the first high-profile guys, I think, with two kick drums. But again, he didn't use a lot. It wasn't until I heard John Bonham, funny enough, and John Bonham only used a single kick.
Yeah.
That I thought that what I had these ideas and were bouncing around in my head was something that could really be applied, because before I heard John Bonham, I was messing around with all this stuff with two bass drums, but what you can play on two bass drums is far more than what you can play on one bass drum. John Bonham probably played as much on one kick drum as you possibly can. I'm just thank the good Lord that he didn't play two. It's just like drumsticks.
It was interesting he never went to that, right? I mean, he had that speed foot, and everybody's like, listen, this is the holy grail of Bonzo, was that he could be like...
Yeah, and it was two notes at a time, but he rarely played more than two notes on the kick drum at a time. And it's just like drumsticks. If you could play with one drumstick what you could do with two, there would only be one in a pack, They wouldn't come in pairs. So just the laws of physics will tell you. I'm just thankful that John Bonham didn't play two bass drums, because like I said, what he did with one was just crazy scary, But he wouldn't be who he is if he played two bass drums, What made John Bonham so special is what he did with that single kick. And it wasn't that he could play things on one kick that you can play in two. It's physically impossible. You can't do to one kick drum what you can do with two, just like with drumsticks. So, but what John Bonham did, some of the ideas that I was having, I was playing in multiples of three, and all I was doing, a friend of mine who used to come over and said, we'd set our kits up facing one another, and we'd just have these stupid drum battles in his garage. He lost interest, so I borrowed his bass drum.
Yeah.
That's how it started. I was just trying to apply the rudiments in a way on the kit that I hadn't heard previously done. And so when I would do a paradiddle, instead of splitting the paradiddle between my right hand and left hand, or splitting it between the toms and I would split it between my left hand and right foot. And then I started splitting it between my left hand, left foot, and right foot, and just for exercise purposes, just trying to develop some dexterity and some facility on the instrument. It was all about exercises. It wasn't ever in a musical context until later on. And then when I heard Bonham doing things on the kick drum, which had typically been done on the left hand, on the snare drum, or on the upper part of the drum kit, I said, "Oh, there is an opportunity to maybe do more on the low end with the kick drum parts." And it's when I started really trying to apply it in a musical sense and doing multiples of 3, 4, and 5 on the bass drums, as opposed to just 2.
It's amazing, jumping ahead here real quick, because I've had a lot of great drummers on, but when you think about where people took the double bass drum later on, like, say, a Dave Lombardo, where it was just so fast and rhythmic, almost sounding like a motorcycle, like... Oh, yeah. That stuff really is mind-boggling where it ended up.
It's... the laws of physics are being defied by so many guys out there today. The stuff that's being played on the instrument, I mean, the bar has been raised so high, it scares me to death. Some of the stuff some of these cats are playing, it's just crazy, man.
Even like Bozio, when he was putting out those VCR tapes, and you'd watch this stuff, like they would zoom in, and you're like, what is this guy even playing? Yeah, I thought it was fake, actually. Well, it was so radical.
Yeah, it is, and Bozio's still doing that. Bozio is still pushing the envelope. There are very few. He seems to have an unlimited power band. Terry Bozio. He's one of those cats. There are very few made like him. He's been doing it for decades.
Yeah,
and he's still pushing the envelope, man. I have to take my hat off of that guy. He's special.
When you get into Black Oak, Arkansas, I had read somewhere that you weren't really into the music too much, but you wanted to get your name out there. You got in the band. You were like, wow, okay, I'm in a serious touring band. And they had some great songs and stuff. What was that like, being all of a sudden this guy from Florida that was touring the world? I talked to Coverdale about playing Cal Jam. You were there that day.
That's the first time I heard David.
Yeah. But that kind of stuff, now you're in a touring band, and it's really, you're learning stuff like, oh, my body is falling apart, or you're playing every day.
In that situation, in that instance, I had been playing all around before I joined that band. With that band, I looked at it as kind of a stepping stone, because I was in a really cool band at the time. It was a little power trio that we had, and we were doing our own music, but we couldn't get arrested as far as a record label was concerned. And back then, it was not like it is now. Record labels actually, it was the only alternative to moving up, and trying to become successful or make it actually a dependable way of surviving and feeding yourself. Instead of having a day job somewhere. The only job I've ever had my whole life has been playing drums, and in order to do that, you have to make enough money at it, so you don't have to go and do something else. Unfortunately, that's the reality of it. And so we were just starving to death, and I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired and starving. So I heard this guy came to me at a gig once. He said, when you want to get serious about this business, give me a call. These guys are looking for a drummer. I'd never heard of him. It was a band called Black Oak. I'd never heard of him, so I gave him a call. A couple of weeks later, our band split up because we couldn't get any work. We couldn't get a record deal.
Were you playing covers or originals?
No, we were doing all original stuff, but it was like crazy. It was like speed freak music. We weren't speed freaks, but we sounded like we were on meth. It was like as fast as we could get it, and then we'd try to get it faster, We were
like kids. Early speed metal, huh?
Yeah, it was crazy. And so I called the guy, and a week or so later, I get a call from this guy and said, we're having auditions for drummers in Memphis. And I went up from New Orleans. I was living in New Orleans. And I drove up to Memphis and auditioned, and I got the gig, with Black Oak. And then started, it was a lot of touring. I was with that band for a little over 6 years, not so much volitionally, the last 4.5 of them. And we were averaging 250 shows a year.
Man,
that's crazy. Over the time that I was in that band, over 250 shows a year.
That is crazy.
When I joined that band, it was 2.5 years before I had a chance to go and see my mom and dad. Yeah, 2.5 years.
Now, you signed a contract when you joined this band, correct? To where you couldn't leave. I never heard of this. I've heard of signing record deals and all that, but
yeah, that was stupid. I was an equal owner, and there were 5 of us, and the manager was an equal owner, and he was He was the real villain, that guy, you know. And even though I was an equal owner, I was signed to an employment agreement to the corporation. Even though I was an equal owner in the corporation, I was subject to this employment agreement, and it superseded all the other. It got so complicated. There were California entities and stuff, and there were land partnerships and all this stuff. And the band became very successful, not because it was like a huge hit machine, but just because when you play 250 shows a year, you do it that way. We did use the manual approach because we never got any airplay, you know.
Yeah, just you're out there with grassroots in it, and
right.
and actually it's like a full-time job.
It was a full-time job, you know. And so and then when I went to the guy and I said, man, I need to go. I'm not really happy here musically, you know. So and that was the coup. He said, dude, no. You signed this here, and then he said you can go, but you're not going to work for anyone else. And so, and they threatened me physically. You can go. If you leave, we'll something bad may happen to you.
No shit, huh?
Yeah, and I'd never experienced anything like that. And these guys they were several years older than I was. You know, I was still a little wet behind the ears, and it intimidated me. I'd never been confronted with that in my career before. In the years past. You know, if you weren't happy, you'd go and everybody said, oh, man, well, good luck, you know. I hope everything works out. But no, in this case. And so I stayed for another 4 years, you know, scared poopless that if I left, something bad would happen, you know.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was stupid.
Like they actually said, was it the management that said that or some guys in the band?
Well, the manager was an equal owner, and it was a management company. There were publishing companies, there were leasing companies, there were real estate development companies, the partnerships, there were all these things. Like I said, the band became very successful because we made a lot of money, you know. I wasn't that interested in the money. I said, well, keep it all and just let me go. And he, nope, wouldn't do that, wouldn't work. And so it was over a year in lawsuits and all kinds of stuff. It was awful.
Were you making some good money in that band?
I didn't really see any of it because it was already being invested. Yeah, on paper I was worth a lot of money, but again, that's not why I was doing it. I was never motivated by the greenback, you know, because I said when I wanted to leave, and I said, well, you guys just keep I'll sign all my stuff and just let me have my contractual freedom. But they went into that. They wanted me to sign to there was a management company that I was part of the whole conglomerate, you know. I owned a part of it. It was weird. It was like being a slave to myself to some degree, you know.
That's wild.
It's very strange, yeah. I learned a hard lesson, you know. I haven't had management since then. I've had one manager in my whole career, and it was that guy, you know, and I never chose that particular guy, but I learned a lot, you know. There's this thing about a lot of musicians say, well, I'm a musician, I'm into the art and this, that, and I don't need. Well, smart guys, they learn about that, you know, because it's an important part of the business. And I learned it was a really expensive lesson for me, you know, and there was nothing I could ever have learned in school, you know, that would teach me those kind of lessons. And luckily, I survived it, you know, but I learned about signing contracts. I would carry around a briefcase going to depositions and stuff for a year, you know, and it wasn't fun, but I was the only person I felt I could trust, you know.
Right. Yeah. So you never had a manager after that. No. What do you have, just a lawyer that looks over the deals?
I don't have a lawyer.
No? So you're pretty...
I don't sign agreements, and the only trouble I've ever had legally is from signing something. So I try, and if I don't sign anything, then I don't have any legal issues, you know. I never signed I don't have any agreements with Ozzy or Sharon or any of that. It was all, you know, on a handshake, you know, and
that's wild.
Yeah, it left a deep and impressionable impression, a deep impression on me, you know, that time. And again, I've never had any kind of legal issues except with things that I've signed.
Yeah, because that's something they can hold you to.
Marriage license or, yeah.
You never been married?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I got you. So once you're out of Black Oak and you're kind of floating around, you're in Chicago, how does the Pat Travers thing happen?
Actually, we're floating around in Chicago and working with a band called The Thumbs. It was a small D apostrophe Thumbs. And it was a really cool band. Peter Comita was one of the guitar players, Gary Levine. And Peter Comita went on to play bass with Cheap Trick when Tom took a break for a while, hiatus.
Yeah, he played in my friend's band too, the Flame they were called.
Oh, really?
Yeah, on Giant Records.
And it was a really cool band. And Rupert Perry and some other people in the industry came in here and wanted to sign the band, but because of my thing, thing, I was tied up in all these lawsuits, and they wanted me to sign Capitol Records were interested, but they wanted me to sign a key member clause. Well, I couldn't sign anything because I was tied up in all these lawsuits.
Oh,
Yeah, it was awful, you know. And so we relocated. We came out to San Francisco to go in the studio, and it was getting really close to when I was about to finalize all these legal crap, you know. And just about the time that happened, I get a call from this guy, David Hemmings, who's a manager, not the British actor. He's a British guy. And funny enough, I met David Hemmings, who was working for Ozzy Osbourne, the first tour that I did with Black Oak, and it was out of the country where we were supporting Black Sabbath. And that's when I met Ozzy. And David Hemmings was working for Ozzy. He worked for Black Sabbath. He was their luggage guy. Well, all this time went by, and in the interim, David Hemmings becomes partners with Ken Dawson, who owned Art of Carter Management, who then at that time was managing Judas Priest. Pat Travers had just signed to him. So David Hemmings, all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over in the fullness of time, had become a up-and-coming manager. So David Hemmings, because I met him when I was at Black Oak with Ozzy, he was now Pat Travers' manager, and Pat Travers had heard me play at a show where Pat's from Ottawa, Canada, and he heard me play a show with Black Oak, supporting ELP, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, in Ottawa, Canada, a big stadium gig there. And my name came up, and David Hemmings says, I know Tommy Aldridge. And Pat said, can you phone him up and see if he's interested in playing drums? Well, I get a call from David Hemmings, and I'm in San Francisco at the time, and I said, well, I'm working on this band, but I can't really do anything. And boom, excuse me, we signed all the agreements and settled all the lawsuits. All of a sudden, I'm free. And so Pat Travers flies to New York. They fly me into New York, get together with Mars and Pat, and we jam for a couple, 2 or 3 hours, and boom.
So that manager got you out of all that bullshit?
No. He didn't have anything to do with that. No.
Just the timing.
The
it was just
timing
magical.
of that. Yeah, my lawyer in Chicago got me all that out of that bullshit, and perseverance and not being a wuss and standing up to this Hitler dude, you know, this management company, this manager guy that handled all the Black Oak's affairs. Yeah. And it just was where the timing happened, you know.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, and I was so frustrated by spending all that time working with this band called The Thumbs and still not being able to get anywhere. It was almost like thinking back to what happened before I started with Black Oak, you know. And I found myself in the same situation, and I wanted to move forward, you know. And it wasn't that I wanted to be rich or that I wanted to be famous. It was that I wanted to feel some gratification and some fulfillment
artistic
in my work, in my art. Yeah. I wanted to play drums and music that I thought was really cool, and that's not what had been happening with Black Oak. You know.
Did you feel Pat Travers was gonna fulfill that?
That was so. I was so happy playing in that band. You know, it was such dramatic music. Pat Travers was at that time, and we got Pat Thrall involved and Morris Cowling. Morris Cowling, the bass player. We lost him. You know, we lost him last year, and how sad. You know, he never got the recognition. Morris Cowling. He was the real element in that band that made it special. You know, people said, "Oh, you should get together with Pat Travers and do that." Well, you can never do that because Mars is gone. You know.
Yeah.
And only Mars could do that. That's the thing about a band. It's not, you don't have all these, you know, interchangeable parts. John Bonham's gone. Hey, Led Zeppelin's gone.
Yeah.
You know, Keith Moon's gone. Boom. The Who, those guys are gone. I'm sorry. You know?
Absolutely.
That's what a band is. Joey Kramer is a drummer with Aerosmith. All the guys that are in Aerosmith are who Aerosmith are, you know? So
people don't understand the chemistry, how hard it is to find chemistry, especially between a bass player and a drummer.
Yeah.
That's such a vital tool. I always say, show me a great band and they've got a great drummer.
Yeah.
That's
the rhythm section.
And the rhythm section.
Yeah.
And people don't know that. And I realized that over the years of playing music, some guys couldn't do the tour, so you got different dudes, and all of a sudden you're like, this doesn't have that feel and then the excitement. And if you listen to Pat Travers, and we get into that live record, that thing is unbelievable. Just the grooves and everything.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I do a lot of clinics and things like that, you know, for Yamaha and Paiste and Remo and ProMark and these guys, and I get more questions about that particular album, I think, than anything I've recorded. And it was a live album. It really is a live album.
It's a true live album.
It's a really, there's no overdubs on that record. It's a real live album. It's like that record.
Where was that recorded?
It was done over 3 nights. There are some songs that were maybe 1 or 2 of the songs all weren't from the same night. It was over 2 or 3 nights. I think most of it was from the Orlando, Florida show.
God,
Pat was living in Florida at the time, and he moved to Florida when he came back from England. He set up down there because that's where the band broke out of Florida.
Yeah.
Floridians, man, those people know how to rock,
Oh, my God.
Florida, man, they rock down there.
I mean,
Always have.
Look where Pat Travers, when you think about it, look, this guy was playing like Oakland Coliseum, like Dan and the Green, 65,000 people. Mm-hmm. There's dudes like Frank Marino, Mahogany Rush, Pat Travers, Robin Trower, and those kind of big, Johnny Winter. These guys were gods and selling out huge venues. It's crazy that nobody even knows who was in the bands or anything. And these days, they could walk down the street, which is like it's a crime to me. It's a crime.
Well, in Pat's case, he was right on the verge of being. We did play big venues like that, with Travers, but it was always someone else was headlining. Of course, we'd be second or third down the bill. Pat was headed to that place, I think, and he was right on the precipice of going to that nuclear zone. And, it started falling apart,
What was falling apart with it? Because
I left, and Pat Thrall and I left at the same time. And
after the boom, the snorting whiskey?
Yeah, and after that live album and stuff, Well, we did...
Crash and Burn?
Yeah, I can't remember the chronology. I think Go For What You Know was after Crash and Burn, wasn't it?
Crash and Burn comes out in 80, but it's like, and then you're gone, but you played on that record.
Yeah, I can't remember. But anyway... It was David Hemmings, the same person that phoned me, that British manager. I had cut a futures deal with him and Pat because they didn't have any money, Pat didn't, he hadn't, and so I said, oh, well, I'll do it I'll just start a very low salary, and then when things start kicking in, because I was committed to it, and hey, it was fun, and we were working our butts off, it was going to happen. And well, when it started happening, they started reneging. And so I was working for a pittance, and then when it was time to come around, and they had every opportunity, and Pat, and it was the same with Pat Thrall, and we both left at the same time. I'm not saying that he didn't get where he should have ultimately gotten because we left the band, but it was it was an inopportune time for him to be making any personnel changes, and that was a choice that somebody made, I don't feel that I made the choice to leave. It was a situation that became untenable, and you have to say, well, at that point in time, I just split up with my girlfriend. My love life was in the pooper. And because of this, my business was in the pooper. And all of a sudden, I found myself back at square one again. Yeah. And that's when I moved to England.
Yeah.
And that's when I hooked up with Ozzy again. I hooked up with Gary Moore over there. And
yeah, you're in England and you start playing with Gary Moore. Yeah. Look at these guitar players you played with. It's unbelievable.
It's pretty scary when I think about it, And it's what an awesome privilege for me, All this, most of the amazing things that I get a lot of credit for, I didn't have anything to do with it. I learned from so many guitar players, Randy Rhoads, Gary Moore, Steve Vai, John Sykes, these guys. You learn stuff from these guys. They got, when you're working in the company of these kind of people, they kind of grab you by the scruff of the neck and pull you up into their
stratosphere.
Yeah,
they're those are some like weird, beyond talent guys.
Supernatural.
So yeah, you're like, what? Randy Rhoads, 2 records,
and he's at the tippy top of that list.
Yeah, right? he's the crown jewel of.
And I'm not saying that because he's gone. It just, I felt that way when he was here. I'd get chills up. The hair would stand up on the back of my neck doing sound checks sometimes with that guy and jamming with him. It was crazy, man. And the most one of the almost unbelievable aspect about it was he was so humble. I remember when I first started working with the first rehearsals, it was here in L.A., and I said, Randy, man, your tone, man, I said, I'm so honored to be here. He was embarrassed. He was embarrassed.
Wow.
He was embarrassed. because I had a couple of years on Randy, and he was a big fan of mine, And I said, man, I'm so humbled to be here. It's such an honor to be working with you. And no one knew who he was at that time, It was just starting to pick up,
Yeah. I saw some of those early gigs.
Yeah.
Day on the Green with Hart, that one.
It's funny, I did a Day on the Green with Travers. I did a Day on the Green with Ozzy as well, yeah.
Those were the best gigs.
Yeah. Aerosmith and...
Yeah.
God, yeah, there was AC/DC.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I remember with Travers, we were out and we were special guesting with AC/DC just before the last tour that Bon Scott did with them. Bon Scott was such a sweet guy. He was in our dressing room every night. He already had a bottle of Jack Daniels, and he came in, and he was just never saw any of the other guys. I never even really met Phil Rudd,
Yeah.
They were all, they'd say hello and stuff, but Bon was always in our dressing room. He was a big fan of the band, and he'd be on the side of the stage boogieing, Every night he'd come in the dressing room and say hi. And we did the last show, and then we had like a 10-day break, and we were going to start in the UK, and I flew over, and we were doing a couple of days of rehearsal to knock the dust off, for me, and boom, we get the news, Bon's gone.
Oh.
It was devastating, It was almost, when Randy passed away, I felt the same thing, that guy was really special, Bon Scott.
Yeah,
I was so honored to do the last show. Every night he sang exactly the same way every night.
Oh, you had to be just tripping out watching.
Oh, Bon Scott. Yeah, I was a huge AC/DC fan.
Yeah, same here, dude. I got Bon Scott tattooed on my side.
You did. That's a great shot, too.
Yeah. I love him, man.
That's amazing.
He's an absolute god.
Doing shows in the UK with Black Oak. Outdoor shows and AC/DC being on the bill. And man, they would kick ass, That's when they were coming up.
Yeah.
They weren't even closing, We'd be way down on the bill, And they'd be somewhere second or third or fourth on the bill, And I said, oh man, I love that band, yeah.
Let's get into this. You're playing with Gary Moore, who is absolutely the killer. Was that the Still Got the Blues era? Is that era? Because I saw that tour, played Wolfgangs in San Francisco.
Parisian Walkways.
Right.
Yeah.
Gary Moore, what kind of guy was he? Because he was so amazing.
Yeah, and he had such a bad rap because he had left the Lizzie tour,
Yeah.
And he had such a bad rap. Irish, hot-headed, fighter kind of guy, big-boned Irish dude.
Of course, he had that scar on his face.
Potato guy. I heard all these scary horror stories about Gary Moore, but I remember when I was with Travers, we were playing at Long Beach at Swing Auditorium. I can't remember who we were supporting. Maybe in Rush. I don't know. Gary Moore came backstage. And he was dressed all in red leather. And it was when he was in a heavy-duty rocker. And he wasn't playing. He just came to the show because he wanted to hear. He wanted to see Travers, And he was very nice. That's when I first met Gary. And then when I finished the last Travers day, and I said, dude, I'm out of here. Sorry, man, but I didn't even fly back to America. The last show was some outdoor show in Germany. And I gave Mars and all those guys my goodbyes, and I flew to London, and I lived in London for the next 3.5 years, and that's when I hooked up with Gary, and I get a call from someone at Jet Records. Gary was signed to Jet Records.
Same with Ozzy, the same label, yep.
Sharon Osbourne's father.
Dad, yep.
She was working in the office doing menial office work in the office. I think I met Sharon before Ozzy did. And I was rehearsing with Gary, and I get a call from Don Arden saying, there's a gentleman who wants to come down. He's just signed him with Ozzy. And they were trying to get Ozzy out of the mothballs, trying to get Ozzy going, after the Sabbath thing.
Right, yeah.
And his guitar player is going to be working with Ozzy. He was a huge Gary Moore fan and wanted to come and meet Gary. Boom, this little blonde-haired skinny kid walks in, and it's Randy Rhoads. That's when I met Randy. He came to one of our rehearsals to meet Gary. And he didn't even know I was there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so crazy.
So he hung out watching Gary and listening to Gary, and then he and Bob came to one of the gigs. We did a night, a live show at not the Speakeasy, but I can't remember the name of the venue. It was where I think Dirty Fingers, Marquee in London.
Oh yeah, the Marquee. Gone now, but what a venue.
And Bob, Daisley, and Randy came to that show. and we hung backstage.
And were they saying, "Hey, man, we've got the band going, and we're recording some songs"?
There was some talk about previous to those records actually being recorded, but I didn't know anything. Nobody knew about Randy, and nobody knew about those albums. And it's funny enough, it was during that same time frame because Ozzy signed to Jet. Gary was signed to Jet, and Don Arden calls me to his office one day, and he says, "Tommy, this is Sharon Osbourne's father." They weren't even together, Ozzy and Sharon, at that time. And he says, "Thomas, I want to ask you a question. Could you do some session work for me?" I said, "Sure, Don. What do you have?" And he said, "Could you let me play this?" And he played something for me, and it sounded really amazing. I didn't know what it was, but the guitar on it was stupid crazy, and it was an odd time, and it was the song "Diary of a Madman."
Oh, what a
and
tune!
He said, "Could you redo the drums on this?" And there's some other tracks, and I said, "Well, I could, Don. Is there a click on it?" He says, "What the fuck's a click?" You know? He didn't know.
You can say anything you want.
He didn't know what a click track was. He was a notorious cusser. He's one of these guys, you know, circus background, you know, and wrestling and boxer promoter.
Yeah, like a Peter Grant.
Yeah. Anyway, except he was this big. Peter Grant was a huge guy. Anyway, he was old school British, you know, business cat, you know, tycoon kind of guy. Anyway, I said, "Sure, Don, but man, you don't want to change any of that. That's magical." I didn't know what he was trying. They were trying to get the drums and the bass off of those records before they were even released.
That's crazy.
And they ultimately did it with Mike Borden, but it was 2 decades later.
Yeah.
But no one knows that.
Yeah. I
didn't know it at the time.
Even at the time.
No one, and like I wouldn't take credit for any of that stuff. I remember when the Diary of a Madman album came out. I call it Diarrhea of a Madman at that point, and my album picture was on. I was pissed at Sharon. I said, "Sharon, people are going to think that I played on that record. I don't play anything like that." I said, "I wouldn't claim to play those drums," and this was the greatest respect to Lee Kerslake.
Yeah,
but I don't play like that, you know. And what made those records what they are is, the sum of the parts. The sum of the parts, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
The magic is insane.
What stood out was Randy.
Yeah.
You know? And he was the real, there's a magical element in all those iconic records, whether it be, you know, the first Police album or the first Cream album or whatever. There's a supernatural thread to it. And not in my mind was it Ozzy, it was Randy Rhoads. And so when I heard that record for that music for the first time, and they were trying to get the drums off of it, I said, "Man," he said, "Well, could you play it better?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to think I could play it better. I could play it more technical or whatever, but you don't want to mess with that." And I was being honest with him as a musician, you know, not as someone looking for work and looking to bump somebody off an album or something. And the last thing I would do is take credit for someone else's drumming. I don't need to do that, you know. Lee Kerslake should have credit for his drumming.
Absolutely.
You know? Who would want to take credit for somebody else's work? I mean, that's so silly. I would never do that, you know. And people thought that, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you're a kid, you just think it's Rudy and you know, we just figure.
And I was upset with Sharon because I said that. And I said, Lee Kerslake should have the credit to music. No musicians had any credit on that record. I don't know if you noticed that. There were no musician credits on there.
Oh wow, I've never even noticed it. I've listened to it 1,000 times. When you join up in the group, do you listen to those first 2 records and think, should I just play it exactly like this, or did you say I wouldn't have done this and start tweaking on it?
Well, no. When you're called in, I believe it's your responsibility to faithfully reproduce the music that you're pulled in to do, even if you didn't play on it. Now, I'm the worst copy drummer in the world because I spent so little of my formative years copying other drummers. I started early on trying to distinguish myself by playing things that I hadn't heard other guys play, and that's when I started using 2 bass drums and trying to apply the rudiments in ways on the kit that I hadn't been able to do with only 1 bass drum. And so that's kind of how my style, or whatever silliness that I do, that's how it evolved. And so consequently, I'm the worst copy drummer in the world. I mean, if I hear something, I can pick out the parts and play the parts, but again, I never tried to. I tried to cop the parts that were like the intro to Over the Mountain.
Of course.
To play Over the Mountain, you got to play the intro to Over the Mountain.
You got it.
Now the way I played it is not the way Lee Kerslake played it. I play the same figure. If you write it out, I just assign it to a different drum instead of splitting the 16th note triplet between the tom toms and the snare. I split it between the kick drums and the tom toms.
Oh,
and
wow.
the snare.
I got you.
I'm
So you're like
part-
double bassing it?
Yeah, I'm playing part of the left hand
Instead
part.
of this?
The rack tom
Right.
part, I'm playing it with my left bass.
Oh, wow.
It just sounds heavier to me. That's how I would have played it if I recorded the part.
Wow.
But I try to faithfully reproduce the vibe, and otherwise you're not playing that music. You know.
Yep.
You have to play the parts that are part of the music, or you're not playing that song. You know. But I try to. Without compromising that element, I try to do put whatever it is. I try to approach it from my perspective, you know, and do it. Be true to myself, because I can't be someone else. I'm not a morph, you know. I'm not. I'm a terrible copycat, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you're in Ozzy and the records are, the first one comes out, it's exploding.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Rudy's a good friend of mine, and I talked to Rudy quite a bit about it, but just these brutal tours of nonstop. Like, you know, okay, you're going to Texas, 18 nights straight, all over weird. El Paso, you know, just every little stop. And then, okay, now you're going to go across the states. Okay, now you're going to go back across the states. That stuff had to start getting crazy. But you guys were slowly becoming a band and slowly starting to explode.
Yeah, it was in the difference between the stuff that the work that I did with Black Oak, that was all word of mouth, and it was beating the streets. It's getting out there and doing it manually. In the case of with Ozzy, there was a lot of airplay kicking in, and
Hits.
so there was a media that was supporting it, and so people knew who you were before you came in town. With Black Oak, we had to play a town 3 or 4 times, and then people would come and see you, you know. They'd see you live, and then they'd go to buy the record. In Ozzy's case, they'd hear it on the radio, and they'd come see the show. So they worked together, and so they started getting bigger, and this big momentum started building, and it was really, really magical, you know. It was really a real honor and a privilege and a blessing to be part of that, and to see the excitement building around the likes of Randy Rhoads and what he was bringing in, because he was a guy that was not just a great songwriter. He was also had amazing facility on his instrument. There are very few guys like that. Eric Clapton's another one. Eddie Van Halen is one. There's very, very few composers that are awesome technicians, too.
Yeah, Jimmy
I don't know why
Page.
that is.
Right.
Jimmy Page is one, you know. I don't know why that is. It seems to be the really great songwriters in the band are the guys that don't play very well. That's really strange. They're really, really creative, but for some reason they don't. Maybe that side of their brain is spent, you know, doing that rather than chopping out, you know, in the rehearsal room. I don't know. But Randy was a rare exception to that. And for all that to be building and doing all that legwork, and you're right, we were running around like blue-ass flies. It was crazy, you know, and the routing was not always ideal, because, you know, you just didn't have, sometimes you'd be in a strong market and you'd have to skip across 2 or 3 states, and, you know, it was crazy. But we got really, really good at it, and we were really focused at it. We weren't drug addicts. We weren't alcoholics, well, with the exception of one.
Right, yeah.
Randy was very serious about what he was doing. Rudy Sarzo is a you know, straight as a day is long.
Yep.
And we were dotting our I's and crossing the T's, you know, and doing what hardworking musicians do. And hey, it was paying off, you know, and that's how it's supposed to be done. And consequently, we had a really good work ethic. You were asking about Gary Moore. Gary Moore had a great work ethic. All the things I heard about Gary, he had a temper, but he was a hard-working dude, and we had the same work ethic when it came to rehearsal. I love getting in rehearsal, and boom, 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 you do it until you can't do it wrong, you know? And you go out on stage, and people say, oh, it looks effortless. Well, that's because we made it look effortless. By doing it so many times, it's impossible for us to do it wrong. The difference between an amateur musician and a professional is a professional musician has a time to do it so many times that he can't mess it up.
So many times wrong when no one's looking.
Yeah. And so with Gary, it was a great honor working with Gary, and I learned so much from Gary. Never had a crossword for me, because we were on the same page, you know. So I didn't understand the some people go to a restaurant and it was crap, you know, and some people go to it and it's the best meal they've ever had. One man's ugly is another man's wife.
Yeah.
So my case with Gary Moore, hey,
Wow.
One of the best, man. Sweetheart. Hard-working dude, you know.
What were some of the sound checks like with Ozzy when you guys were out? Was Rhoads? Were you guys doing any kind of jamming or anything, or is it straight up just the songs and business?
Well, Ozzy was never at a sound check.
I know that, but I'm saying as the group.
We would. Randy would have Randy was in the tuning room laying down stupid, scary riffs. You know, it was crazy. And we would jam sometimes. Most of the time, we didn't have much time to jam. You know, that's the thing. When the money comes in, you got unions, you got crews, you got curfews, building curfews. All of a sudden, people think, "Oh man, I bet you must be really playing your butt off." Well, you don't get to rehearse any when you're out on the road.
Yeah.
You get to play the same crap, not crap, but the same show night after night after night. It becomes business. You get in, you got 3 bands playing before you. If you're going to do a good show, you have to give those guys an opportunity. You want to be a good person. I'm not a dick, so if I'm headlining, I want to make sure that the guys playing before us have every opportunity that I didn't have when I was coming up because of a dick headliner and won't let you do a sound check. What's up with that?
Yeah.
You know, give everybody an opportunity to do their very best. What are you scared they're going to do better than you or something? You know, be encouraging and be inspirational to the people that you're working with, because from the first downbeat of the gig that night, if it's 3 bands on the bill and you're closing, it all reflects on you, you know. When people pay their hard-earned money, I think it's incumbent upon everybody that's involved, especially the headlining band, that everybody gets the opportunity to put their best foot forward, to do their very best. People give up their time, their money to come and see you. You owe them that. You know? All these my neighbors there, and one guy's a dentist, and they go, "Oh man, you got a party gig." Bullshit. You don't have a boss. Hey, if I'm playing in front of 25,000 people, I have 25,000 bosses that night. You know? I have to answer to all. I need to make sure that those guys leave there happy. You know? And so all that kind of drama and stuff, that doesn't have anything to do with music or musicianship. It has to do with humanity and people being a dick or being a nice guy. Randy Rhoads was as nice a person as he was an awesome guitar player, you know.
God, he was just insane.
Sweet as the day is long. Give you the shirt off his back.
Oh, man.
Man, inspire you to no end, you know. You compliment him, he becomes embarrassed.
Yeah.
That's that's something real special, you know.
Can you take me through that day that the crash happened? You guys were out there.
Well, it was awful. It wasn't a day. It was a night. We were traveling from somewhere in Texas, I think Houston, and we were traveling to Florida. We were going to do a show in Kissimmee, I think. It was the first show in Florida. I was so looking forward to getting to Florida, because Floridians, they kick ass. Every show, I've always looked forward to playing in Florida. I look forward to always playing, but Florida, it's really, Floridians, they're rock.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Crazy rock crowds?
Crazy.
Like the South?
Every band I've ever played in, I can't wait to get to Florida. They just love you, they embrace you. I'm not saying it because I was raised in Florida. It's just, they love music in Florida. It's really, and it's been that in every band I've been in. Can't wait to get to Florida, you know. Anyway, the guy's up driving all night. Andy Aycock, the bus driver. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but he was doing bad things while he was driving. You know? He was also an airplane pilot, and he was a helicopter pilot. And previous to this, he'd had a bad limp from crashing in a helicopter.
Really?
You know?
I never even knew that.
Yeah.
He'd crashed with a helicopter.
Very few people know the true story of what happened. I was there, and I haven't shared it with many people. There were so many things going on. I didn't want to say anything about the bus driver being on blow because I didn't want insurance to be impacted. There were so many things that were going through my mind. But he's up all night driving.
He's just doing bumps while he's driving?
All night. I know for a fact because I saw him do it.
Yeah.
I knew there was a huge stash somewhere on the bus, you know, and I knew that the Florida CHP, the state troopers in Florida, you know, I grew up in Florida, and they were always looking to bust people.
Yeah, they don't fuck around.
Here. Anyway, he's up all night, and the bus company that we leased the bus company from, they were based in that place where the bus ended up crashing, where this all happened. He stopped there to invited Don Airy and some of the other guys the night before. He said, "Oh, I'll take you guys up for a joyride." Well, I fly all the time. The last thing I want to do on a day off, especially after driving all night, is fly on an airplane. You know?
Yeah.
So Don Airy goes up with him, and he does a joyride. I'm in the bunk. The bus is parked. We've been driving all night. It's like 7 o'clock in the morning, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Florida in the summer, it's hot as the hinges of hell. and I hear the plane flying over with Don,
Yeah.
and it lands.
You're awake.
It wakes me up.
Yeah.
And then the last thing Randy Rhoads said to me, he comes by my bunk and he reaches in and he tickles me. He said, "Come on, TA, let's go for a joyride." And I said, "Randy, the last thing I want to do is go get on a plane right now." I said, "He's been driving all night. He's got no business flying around in an airplane." And Randy says, "Oh, come on." And then Rachel, our wardrobe lady, who was Don Arden's maid and Sharon's maid, an elderly lady, she hated flying. Had a heart condition. I don't know how she ended up on that plane.
And Randy hated flying too, right?
I wasn't a huge fan of it. I didn't understand any of it, And so I hear the plane flying around, and I can't sleep, so I get up and I start making a cup of tea, and then bam, I'm leaning, against the, stirring a cup of tea, and bam, and the lady and the bus driver's girlfriend standing in the bus doorway, and it's open, and she said, "They've hit the bus." He's screaming, they've killed themselves. And I'm thinking, and all of a sudden I smell fiberglass. I'm still half asleep. It's early in the morning. And the plane, the plane wing hit the bus, and the whole top section of those Silver Eagles at that time were made out of fiberglass.
Yeah.
So you smell real, smell fiberglass, real strong smell.
Yep.
And I said, "Oh my word, what the world's going on?" So I jump out, and Rudy's in the back of the bus. Sharon and Ozzy are asleep in the back of the bus. I run out. And I'm thinking, she's screaming, they've crashed. And I'm trying to find, well, where's an airplane, There's a big hole in the side of the bus. And then I look, and the bus is here like this. I'm here, and the house that the plane had hit is on the other side of the bus. Well, the plane hit the bus, and it went tail first through the roof of the garage. Well, I didn't know this. I run around, and I see black smoke coming up from above the top of the bus. And I run around, and it's coming out of the house, and I run in the front of the house, and there's this guy sitting there butt naked, an old guy. I didn't know at the time. He's deaf, and he's reading the newspaper. He doesn't even know any of this stuff's going on.
Whoa.
And I freak him out, because I got
Yeah.
my hair, and I just wake up. And I said, "Man, the house is on fire." And he thinks I'm like, I guess, a home invader. I don't know what he thought. And I ran out the front, and I ran around the side of the house, and the garage doors are open, and the fire's going. The tail of the plane is tail first in the garage, and then I would take 2 steps, and it goes, and I guess the gas tank, and it singed my hair.
Whoa.
My
Right in front of you.
right in front of me. I still didn't know really what was going on. I didn't know that was actually the airplane, and it wasn't until I said. And then Don Airy comes out. He said, "Man, they've crashed. That's with Randy and those guys are in an airplane." I said, and then we were all in shock at that point. The house literally burned to the ground before the fire station. And the first thing I think of is there's drugs in the bus.
Oh.
So I go into the bus, and I start looking all around the driver's seat trying to find this guy's stash.
Oh yeah, because that guy's dead now. The driver.
He's gone.
Right.
He's gone. And I envision in my head state troopers coming, Ozzy Osbourne's band, plane crash, drugs, all this. And I pop off all these switches and gauges for the bus are over here, and I pop the top off of that, and there's this huge big baggie of
blow?
Yeah.
Just
rocks.
a giant bag of blow.
Yeah.
Hidden in the gauges?
I run out into the woods with it, and I just throw it all over. You know what? I've never told anyone this. No one knows any of it. Because I thought, well, if there's drugs involved, all the insurance, and all, this is what's going through my head.
God, that is insane.
It was insane. We were in shock. Rudy was in shock. I was in shock.
Yeah.
And then Sharon and Ozzy come out, and she's taking her shoe and hitting Jake Duncan, our tour manager, in the head. "How could you let that baby on that plane? How could you let that baby on that plane?" It wasn't his fault.
Right. Do you think, Rudy, I talked to Rudy about this extensively. Do you feel that since the bus driver and his woman were breaking up and having a fight, do you feel that he was trying to maybe kill her and then at the last minute backed out of that?
I have no way of knowing. It's all so crazy. The fact that Randy Rhoads and Rachel would get on go for a joyride in an airplane, in any circumstance, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, there's so many theories and rumors and stuff like that. I traveled with Andy Aycock, the bus driver. I mean, that was a long tour, and he seemed like a fine guy. I knew that he was doing something, the fact that he had been driving all night. He had no business being in an airplane, and that's the last thing I said when Randy walked past my bunk. Man, who wants to get on an airplane? We've been traveling all night, and he's been driving all night. What's he doing flying an airplane?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And somebody alluded to that, but I don't. I have no way of knowing it, and even if it did, it wouldn't make any difference.
Wouldn't matter.
Randy's gone.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
He made a choice to go up on the plane, you know, and it's none of it made any sense to me. And of course, my mom is hearing Ozzy Osbourne's band dies in a fiery plane crash, and there were no telephones. It was pre-cell back then. You know?
Yeah,
there
of
were
course.
cells, but half of them didn't work, and the plane, the house burned to the ground before they could get water there. There was no water supply there, you know.
God, that's
It
crazy.
was so crazy, and it was hot, and it was sticky, and so we went to this hotel, and we're waiting to find out what's going to happen, and we were in shock. We were walking around like zombies, crying, you know.
Yeah.
Randy's gone. Rudy and Randy were really, really close friends.
Of
You know, Rudy
course.
was closer to Randy probably than anybody.
Yeah, they
you know?
played in Quiet Riot together.
Yeah, and it's very strange because just a few days before that, we're at a bar in Houston, and Sharon and Ozzy tell us that we're going to do a live album with Black Sabbath tunes, and Randy says, "I'm not playing any Black Sabbath music," and I said, "I'm not either." And Randy, Ozzy bitch slapped him,
Whoa.
hard as he could in the face.
No shit.
Yeah. So that was the last interaction that you know. So the fact of this this made up story that Ozzy and Randy were like bosom buddies. No.
Wow.
That was the last album that Randy Rhoads would have played on, you know. He wanted to go do classical stuff. I'm not saying he wouldn't have done any more rock music.
Right.
But there wouldn't have been any more.
No
He
speak of
wasn't
the
laying
devil.
any more golden eggs for that
Yep.
bunch. I know for a fact. We had too many conversations, you know.
You ended up staying and doing the Speak of the Devil with Brad Gillis. That had to be like a really, really strange time.
It was.
Brad, I give Brad big props because he did pull that off. I mean, that's
And
the
it's funny because Brad came to us through a recommendation from Pat Thrall, who was the guitar player with Travers, who left at the same time I did when we left Travers. I phoned Pat and I said, "Dude, man, we need someone that'll come in that's really good enough to play Randy's parts and won't try to, you know, but won't, you know, try to do their own thing." And he gave me Brad Gillis's phone, and I called him up, and he says, "Well, I'm doing this band, but yeah, I'd be honored to come and give it a shot, you know."
You gave him a call?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Pat Thrall gave me his number, and I called him up and passed him on to Sharon, you know, yeah.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, after the Brad thing goes and you guys are auditioning and looking for Jakey Lee comes in, but before that, do you remember, because I had the singer for Bullet Boys on, Mark, and he said that he actually had got the gig and they announced it in the LA Times, and then you two had a little thing and he was gone. Is that real?
I didn't have a thing. That is real. He got the gig. He bought it. Ozzy went out and they bought him a Marshall stack, a nice gorgeous Jackson, you know. And Randy, Sharon phones me up and says, "Tom Baum, come out," because I've been flying around like all over the place auditioning guitar players. "Tom Baum, we found him." I said, "You're kidding." She flew straight out to L.A. Go get a rehearsal room. Introduced me to the cat. Oh, it sounded like, oh my word, it sounded like somebody threw a guitar stack down a staircase. It was awful. We tried something else. It was even more awful. And Rudy's looking at me, and I thought this was the cat, you know. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus,
Yeah,
but that's
right.
the reality of it.
Yeah.
And Sharon says, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Do you really want to know what I think?" I said, "Didn't you hear?" She's on the phone, you know.
Yeah.
And I said, "That's not the guy. I'm sorry. I mean, he's not playing any of the parts, Sharon. You want the parts played right. It's got to sound like the music, you know. It's, you know, with the greatest respect." And again, it was with the greatest respect. They weren't my guitar parts, you know. I didn't make the decision. I told her what I thought.
And then it was back to auditioning
And
guys.
back to auditioning, and I was auditioning guys in Dallas. I was auditioning guys all over the place, and we auditioned Jakey Lee out here, and George Lynch was in the mix.
Yep, talked to him about it.
I saw George the other day out at Mates. You know, he's sounding awesome. You know, he's another one of those cats. You know. And George Lynch was probably overqualified for the gig. George Lynch was so good that he could have copped Randy's parts, but he was himself too, you know, and there was more of himself that he wanted to, and you can't blame him for that. In fact, I respected him for that, you know, and I didn't make that decision. Those decisions weren't mine.
Yeah.
You know?
But you were in charge of auditions, so you would fly around and just rent a room, and you and Rudy?
They would set the room up, and we would get guys in, yeah.
No
Rudy
shit.
and I would go in and audition the guys, yeah.
All over the country?
I auditioned in a bunch of different places, yeah. Dallas, out here, a couple of other places. It kind of all ran together, because even what happened when Randy died, it was done for me, but I felt really an obligation to Sharon and Ozzy to help them, because they had all this. Sharon and Ozzy wanted to try to maintain the momentum, and I felt I was respectful of, but them really their reliance on me to try to help them find somebody. So I took that mantle, you know, and Rudy did too. We felt kind of a responsibility, you know, and we were kind of honored that they would ask us to help, you know.
Do you remember anybody, as you were doing this, that was almost there and later became famous? You're like, oh, I remember that kid. He came in. Anybody like that?
Yeah, there was a gentleman that he played with Ozzy for a while.
Oh, that guy, yeah.
He came in later.
Yeah,
I can't remember his name.
His name
Very
is...
good guitar player, but
Yeah.
he came in way later.
Yeah, he played for like one tour. I saw him. Man, I know
He was very good.
I know his fucking name,
Yeah.
too.
But Jake was good enough to play Ozzy's stuff and was smart enough to know that he needed to. And, you know, he looked the part, and he was motivated. You know?
He was fire.
Yeah.
I saw the US Festival. I was there. And I thought that was the first gig with Jake, but I had Jake on recently, and he's like, no, we did about 2 weeks of makeup dates.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, that US Festival, do you remember that? Because I mean, you got to think about what you've played. You've played Cal Jam 1, which is one of the biggest of all time California festivals, and then you do the most monumental rock metal day ever, which was the US Festival Day 2, which I think to that day was the day that the actual record businesses, all the record people were like, oh, whoa, start signing everything. Because that was insane that day. It changed everything.
Yeah, it was, it didn't seem, I remember both those very well. I remember almost every gig I've ever done. The thing with Jake, as good as he was and as good as everyone filled in, no one came anywhere near what Randy did, you know.
Yeah.
God, it was crazy. His tone, it was so big, and it wasn't just volume. It wasn't just level. It was a presence. It was just, man, everything else was small pickings, you know. And I say that with the greatest respect.
Of course.
All those cats, you know.
I mean, it's got to be a lot like if you look at Skinnerd and they lose Ronnie. To me, when you lose, like we said, Bonzo.
Or Thin Lizzy losing Phil Lynott.
I mean, come on. You know, it's just like these guys are beyond. They're the reason we still listen to the music to this day.
Absolutely.
They are the reason.
Supernatural, man.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's big.
You now, I never knew this, but you played on a Motorhead record, and you didn't get credit, but it was when Phil got fired the second time.
Well, that was the understanding. Phil Carson, who was not managing, but looking after them, he's the one that phoned me and asked if I could do it, and I had a break. Excuse me. I had a break in my schedule, and I knew Lemmy and those guys, you know, they did Thousand of Dates with us with Ozzy, and they were sweetheart guys. And Animal was a good buddy of mine, and I agreed to do it if I could do it as a ghost drummer, because I didn't want to step on his toes, because I respected him as a friend, you know. And so I came up and I did it in a day or maybe 2 days. And so that was the reason that I was supposed to ghost drum on it, and my name's not on the album. I did it out of respect to Filthy, you know.
Oh, that's cool. I never knew that.
Yeah.
That was a big record.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. And the engineer wanted to use click, and I said, "Oh, that's great." Well, Lemmy didn't want to play with click, so I put all the drums down with the guitar player, Phil.
Yeah.
And because he would play with a click, but the engineer wanted to use a click, and I was all for that, you know, because they'd never recorded with a click before, you know. And Lemmy didn't want anything to do with the click, so he sat out while we put all the rhythm section stuff down, and he came in and overdubbed the bass later.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
He wasn't even in there. Like,
No.
let me.
And they wanted me to do some special stuff before I recorded, and I said, I don't do that, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Some special stuff.
Marching dust.
Yeah.
Or whatever those guys.
Devil's dandruff.
Oh man, yeah. And I said no, with the greatest respect. I don't work that way, you know.
Did you ever get into anything?
No, I mean I had I smoked pot and stuff, and had a little run with some of the bad stuff, you know, a bit of cocaine, you know, in the Travers days. But I've always been a really thin guy and kind of on the edge anyway, and that stuff just never served me well, you know. It wasn't that I'm a super virtuous person, it just didn't work for me, you know. And I could never do anything before I went on stage or anything like that because it would get in the way of, you know. So, and again, it's not out of virtue, it's just it didn't serve my purposes. So,
yeah.
And it was, that's... My father was an alcoholic, so there's probably maybe some element of that in my psyche, and it's probably a good thing that I wasn't interested in it, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You joined Whitesnake after the big record, the 87 record gets recorded, and you and Rudy get in, and then it's on from then on out. Giant.
And it's funny because I was hanging with Sykesy at the time that he had all those riffs and stuff because he was in L.A., It was before they started actually recording the record, and I heard some of those riffs, man, and I'm thinking, man, this is going to be one crazy-ass record. And I came really, really close to doing the record. We just couldn't work it out. And I was right, man. It's one crazy-ass record, that 87 album.
Oh.
Ainsley Dunbar tore it up. It couldn't have been played any better, you know.
Ainsley Dunbar, what a drummer, huh?
Icon.
Icon.
Oh, David Bowie, Frank Zappa, Journey, Jefferson Starship. Man, you're talking about
that early Journey stuff, dude. Oh,
heavy
my
hitter.
God.
Yeah, that's what laid the foundation for all this other stuff, you know.
All those drummers that have come through Whitesnake, when you think about it, Denny Carmassi. I mean, that's like a drummer paradise.
Yeah, I think the Whitesnake drummer is probably Cozy, you know.
Yeah, Cozy Powell, of course.
When I was with Ozzy, and Randy was still with us, we did a long run through Europe supporting Whitesnake when I was with Ozzy, when Randy was still with us.
Yeah.
Got to hang a lot with Cozy, and yeah, he was the quintessential Whitesnake drummer, I think.
Oh, man, he killed it in Shanker.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that guy.
And Rainbow, you know, but really with Whitesnake, yeah, he was all those names, drummers that you named have been through Whitesnake, and yeah, it's a pretty impressive list. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. You broke your collarbone a while ago. How did that happen?
I've broken a few things. I'm an avid cyclist, not a motorcyclist, a bicyclist.
Yeah, you ride out on tour.
Yeah. No, I wasn't on tour when that happened. I was at home. I hit a deer. I was coming down Figueroa Mountain Road and hit a deer.
Whoa, just on your bicycle?
Yeah, on my bike. I was coming down a mountain pass and came around a bend, and the deer just appeared, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, and I T-boned him right behind the shoulder blades and landed on my back, on my shoulder, my back, and broke my collarbone and a bunch of ribs and the radial head on my left elbow and my little finger. It's still crooked.
Oh, shit.
Luckily, there was an old gentleman coming up in a pickup truck. And because there was nothing, I was up in the mountains. There was nothing around. My cell phone had shattered the screen of my cell phone, but I couldn't breathe anyway because I had so many broken ribs. I didn't know if my lung was punctured or what. I just hit the road so hard, I endoed, you know, and landed on my back of my shoulder, and it knocked the wind out of me. And I was there on the road trying to get my breath, and trying to find. I managed to get my cell phone out, and the screen was on my cell phone was shattered. Luckily, this old gentleman drove up in an old pickup truck, and he picked up. He said, "Son, I don't think you need to be getting up. I saw that you hit the ground really hard." He said, "All I saw was deer and hair." Yeah, and he put my bike in the back of his pickup truck and got me in his truck and took me to the emergency room.
Oh my God! What are you into? Road bikes?
Yeah, road bikes. Yeah.
You ever get into like vintage like Bianchis or anything, or what are you riding?
I'm not into vintage bikes like drums. I like new stuff. New stuff sounds better. The older it is, the older it sounds in my mind. Yeah, I don't have any old vintage stuff. No, it's all cutting edge stuff. I got a lot of bikes, but it's all
carbon fiber stuff.
All carbon stuff.
Yeah. Where do you live now?
I live up in San Ynez, which is just north of Santa Barbara.
Oh, you live? Oh, wow. You're California.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I've been up there for like 17 years, yeah.
How do you like it?
Oh, it's great cycling, and I got to go to my drum room anytime, any hour of the day, or night, and it's cool, yeah.
You're playing Yamaha now. You played Yamaha for a long time.
Most of my career, yeah.
Most of your career. Yeah. How did you choose like bass drum sizes and all that over your career? And also, you never really changed. Like when you look at Bonzo, he was always Ludwig, but he changed like green sparkle, then the natural kit, then the stainless steels and all that.
Yeah.
Were you ever chasing it? Were you always parting out drums and looking for something?
Yeah, always looking. I got so many different drum kits, and the kit that I've been playing most of the time these days is a Phoenix kit, which is like a hybrid shell. It's a thicker shell than Yamaha's ever made, and it's the only handmade kit that they're doing now. All their other stuff is not that any of the other stuff is not as good. It's just it's the only handmade kit that they're making now, and it was quite a departure for them because traditionally Yamaha shells have always been really, really thin ply, 7-9 ply shells. And the Phoenix kit is real thick, the thick shell drum, but it's a composite of different woods, and most of my kits I get two different bass drum sizes. I get 24s and sets of 22s depending on the situation. Almost always use smaller drums in the studio. Smaller drums invariably sound bigger, and I use bigger drums on stage just for the the aesthetic. Yeah. But I've always found that smaller drums sound bigger. They're easier to tune. They're just kinder to the microphone. They just seem to be more recordable. But in the basic setup, I've gone from one rack tom between the kick drums, to two rack toms, and always use two floor toms, and change my cymbal setup a little bit. But the same setup basically. My rehearsal room at home, I have one kick with a double pedal, just because it's convenient. I don't have to take up the whole room with drums. But I like what I like, and try to stick with stuff. I close my eyes a lot, and I know exactly where I'm going. So.
How did the no stick solo start? Because it's such a tradition and a trademark of you.
Yeah, everyone thinks Bonham is the first person that got the most notoriety from it, or the first to gain notoriety from it. And people think that I was copying him, but I started doing it before I ever heard of Led Zeppelin. And it wasn't that I was copying anyone. The first person that I ever actually heard do it was this big guy by the name of Frosty, and he played with Lee Michaels, who was a keyboard player. It was a two-piece band. Lee Michaels played keyboards and sang and played bass pedals with his feet, and Frosty was the drummer, and he was the first guy that I ever heard play drums with his hands. Big, huge, heavy dude. And that was 10 years before Led Zeppelin. But John Bonham made it famous.
Yep.
And I started doing it when I was a kid. I told you that I was a drummer before my dad ever knew it for decades. And I would practice on my drums in the shed in the back of the house, and I'd cover them with towels and practice with my hands so that Dad wouldn't hear them. That's how I started doing it.
Wow.
And then later on, I played in a band, and we had a conga player, and he played timbales, and sometimes during my solo, he'd set his congas up next to the kit, and sometimes during my solo, I would turn and I would play the congas with my hands, put the sticks down, and do figures with the kick drums and the congas, and it just slowly evolved on the kit. And he said, "Oh, you should maybe do the drums, play some on the drums." I said, "It's going to hurt." But he said, "No, you can play it the same way you're doing the congas." And It's true.
That's crazy.
So it doesn't really hurt, but people get off on it. But the sounds that you can get out of the kit is so much different than what you can what you can do with sticks.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
How is your body holding up? You're 68 now?
Yeah.
You've been playing drums all your life. How are your ears? How are your hands, your joints? Yeah, because
ears are good.
Drummers, man, I mean, everything about it is brutal.
And they say it's the amplifiers and stuff, but it's really not. It's when you're learning to play in your rehearsal room and you got all those cymbals and they're right there.
Ooh.
And they're coming off that low ceiling. Cymbals are what eat you up. Thankfully, I've been wearing ear protection for decades before it got popular,
No shit.
And I've been using in-ear monitors before they really had decent, really practical, functional in-ear monitors. So my dB environment is like this conversation. It's like 35, 40 dB in my world.
Is that right?
Yeah, very, very quiet. I don't run hot ear levels on my in-ears. So, and I set behind the drums are behind the
amps.
or aft of the amp line. And it serves a lot of purposes. It's not a lot of leakage going into the drum mics. So I started practicing with my dad's when he'd go shooting into rifle range with the earplugs when I was a kid, and I just stuck with it. I wouldn't have sit behind a kit and play without something in my ears because it's so loud.
Hell yeah.
Consequently, my hearing isn't perfect, but my right ear is very good. My left ear is just below perfect.
Oh,
so
that's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. My wife would beg to differ, but yeah.
Well, that's what do they call that? Where
That's convenient.
You've chosen.
Yeah.
Like my right ear's fried from amplifier and motorcycle exhaust pipes.
Yeah.
So over the years, just
That'll do it.
Oh yeah, it's just trashed.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for doing the show,
Hey, man, thanks for having me. It's an honor. I've heard about you. Michael Devin has spoken very highly of you for a long, long time.
Oh man,
and I know who you are.
It's
I'm going to catch you one of these days.
I really, I don't use that term lightly, legend. You have played in all these great bands that I've loved. I've seen you play live many times, and you are like in those drummers, those five guys that people always talk about. It's those names, and you have won. You've played drums your entire life, and that is the greatest gift you could have. Like you said,
it really is. So far, yeah, it's been an awesome job, man. It's an awesome job.
Yeah.
And when I get a chance to do clinics and things, I don't really go for so much as an instructive perspective. I mean, I play a lot, but more as from an inspirational perspective, because that's what John Bonham gave me, the inspiration that he gave me, apart from all the music. Mitch Mitchell's the same way, the inspiration he gave me. All these guys, Stuart Copeland, all these cats that have really laid down really special stuff. I mean, supernatural stuff that transcends just drumming. It's so musical,
Yeah.
and makes it so much more than just drumming. It's about music, and those are the cats that the inspirational aspect of it, and so I'm in deep debt and have a great debt of gratitude to all those guys that inspired me over the years and decades.
Did you meet any of those guys? Say Bonzo or Stuart Copeland? How about
I met Stuart just in passing.
Keith Moon?
I met Mitch Mitchell. The first time I was in. I'll tell you a quick story.
That's great.
Yeah, when I first started with Black Oak, the first thing I did was went to Miami to record, and I'm setting up this new drum kit, and the guy comes in behind me. He said, "Oh man, a really thick accent. So it was really good." It was Mitch Mitchell. Oh man, he sat and played them, and I was there.
Whoa!
I was in awe, because I was a huge Hendrix fan.
Oh, yeah.
Huge, and what he's crosstown traffic and all that stuff, man.
Oh, Fire.
Manic Depression, Fire.
Oh,
man, Manic Depression, oh, man.
Oh, my God.
Killer. Oh, just crazy, scary stuff, yeah.
Who do you feel out of your entire career was the best chemistry bass player wise with you? This is the guy that we are locked.
Probably Morris Cowling.
Yeah.
I don't say that because he's gone.
Right.
Probably Morris Cowling, because we had a really good hookup, because he was a very, very busy bass player.
Yeah.
And I like to play a lot of notes, and we somehow found a way to make it work, It
was so funky, and the grooves on that. When you hear the grooves on Snortin' Whiskey, drinking cocaine. It's insane on there.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and that live record, the opening track, when it comes on, it's just, what the hell? I mean,
Well, we were having a blast. We were having a lot of fun.
yeah,
you know.
yeah, I could imagine.
And it was just full of joy. It was a lot of exuberance and full of joy. And yeah, we were having a blast, and it just kind of, that kind of stuff you don't plan,
Yeah.
It's not something you prognosticate,
Well, thanks for doing the show.
Thank you, Gideon.
Do you have social media or no?
I have, but
You don't use them.
I'm unplugged.
Yeah. Awesome. Is that because of the political climate?
It's the social media. It's like the cesspit of the internet, man, and I just got kind of fed up.
Yeah.
That's not a criticism. It just to me, it just is what it is.
I get it.
You'd see stuff on Instagram. It's awesome and just crazy, and some dick just shooting it down, and some impressionable guy saying, "Oh, well, that's bad." Well, it wasn't bad, Or then you see crap and people praising it, and the guy, the impressionable guy, "Oh, that's really great." Well, when it's not, and it's just me,
I get it. If I was your level, I would fucking.
It's not about level or anything,
Yeah.
I'm trying to spend less time staring at being programmed by this thing,
Yeah, the phone. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
and
Bean.
looking forward to seeing you,
God bless you, man.
play again in Whitesnake over the summer. And thank you so much. There you guys go, right there. That is an action. Oh, one last thing. Are you in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
No.
That's a
Are you
fucking
kidding?
crime. That's a crime.
No, I don't. The mainstream stuff, no, that's always eluded me,
That's a
And
crime.
I don't pander to it, It doesn't
Still,
bother
though, man.
me. It would almost be, it wouldn't be really fitting, I don't think.
Yeah. Hey, you look great, too.
Oh, well,
68.
thanks, man.
You got all your hair.
I do that, yeah.
You lucky bastard.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review and all that good stuff on iTunes. Candles are lit.